Hello everyone, my name is Levi Gallegos and I will be discussing how Malcolm X has made a huge impact on the African American community and society. Um, so I just want to start off that Malcolm X is mostly known to be a parallel to Martin Luther King Jr. As most of us are familiar with, Martin Luther King had a very peaceful and a humanistic approach concerning racial injustice, whereas Malcolm X is more known to take a more harsh approach, meaning that he believed in that African Americans had every right to fight back. There was even a quote that he had said where if a white man were to hit you, then you take them to the cemetery. So it was a complete different contrast to what we know as Martin Luther King. However, I don't believe Malcolm X was a hateful person. I just feel that he had enough experience to become hateful towards a certain racial group. At a young age, he experienced his house being burned down from the Ku Klux Klan, and his father was actually murdered by the Klan later on. And so he had to move out of his Michigan home later on to another territory, well, to another area, and he was subjected to crime. Later on, he was imprisoned, and I mean, so during his time of imprisonment, he found solace in education, and later on, he found solace in Islam. And Islam was a sense of just guidance, um, especially to a lot of lost African Americans that were imprisoned. And so that's really where he found that he could be accepted. Um, Islam was also so promoted in during that time in the African American community if you had a more radical approach because they believed that Islam was closer to the African roots and identity. So a lot of these African Americans that took on a radical approach, such as Malcolm X, they believed that they needed to reject Christianity because that their identity and their roots were lost during the slave period. So Islam was was a mixture of the religious beliefs as well as black pride and black nationalism, which Malcolm X promoted. Um, Therefore, after Malcolm X's conversion to Islam, he actually became a spokesperson for the black Muslims, and black Muslims really just believed that they should be separated from the whites. Malcolm X had even at one point promoted that all the African Americans should be sent back to Africa and they should have their own country where they're separated from the whites. And it was just very interesting because he it was all about black movement, black power movement, and he also just stated that black individuals had every right to have what other white Americans had, but he believed that African Americans should do whatever it takes to attain what they should have. However, sometime later, Malcolm X ended up splitting from the Nation of Islam and he ended up making a journey to Mecca. During his journey there, he noticed that there was um, a lot of integration of other races in the Islam religion. So he found out there during his journey to Mecca that Islam is not just subject to African Americans the way his mentor made him believe it was. And so it was really just a big eye opener. And so during that journey and just really that revelation that Islam was open to every race and every individual, it really softened his stance towards it really softened his stance on violence. And so eventually he came back to the United States and he actually met with Dr. King, and they were able to trade remarks concerning the stance on violence and peace. And then sometime later after that, he actually led a mass rally in Harlem with his new approach. However, he was gunned down there by black Muslims. So overall, it was just very interesting. Um, he had a very interesting life because most people associate him to have such a harsh approach, but no one ever actually got to witness the transformation that the journey to Mecca really had on him, and no one will ever really know what difference he could have made using his new approach on society. And even now, even despite his harsh movements, I mean, he still influences African Americans today. He made sure to teach African Americans that they need to engage in smarter political voting and fight for their civil rights at an international level. And that's what a lot of organizations are doing today, such as the Ethiopians is Israelis. They really look up to Malcolm X. I mean, yes, he has a more radical perspective, but he's influenced society, and it's really just allowed black individuals to feel empowered. And he has really just made a groundwork for Black Power movement, and he really is just a true historical figure.